Imagine a thriving and profitable lunar colony. Why does it exist? What makes it profitable and thriving? What makes it competitive? What can it do better than any city on Earth? Well, it can build this. And allow us to do this.
Proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition.
With low gravity, no atmosphere, and abundant resources, spacecraft construction is to the moon as oil is to Saudi Arabia, wheat to Ukraine, beaches to the Bahamas. The lunar settlement's primary economic activity will be shipbuilding, filling out the fleets humanity uses to traverse the stars. But how do we get there? Today, there is nothing on the moon. Today, spacecraft construction is one of the most capital-intensive activities we do here on Earth. So, how do we go from absolutely nothing to a fully fledged settlement with a massive industrial base set in a radiated, low-gravity, thermally fluctuating environment 384,000 kilometers away? Did you know the USS Constitution was nicknamed Old Ironsides because the wood it was built of was so strong and dense, cannonballs would literally bounce off it? This was because the ship was made of old-growth trees. Trees hundreds of years old, great big white oaks and pine found only in the vast virgin woods of the New World. By contrast, the Old World, covered in vast farms where man had felled the primeval forests a millennia ago, had now only specially designated royal forests left, all new growth. In a centuries-long shipbuilding arms race with France and Spain, the British naturally began sourcing much of its lumber from the American colonies, providing them with a considerable advantage. By the mid-18th century, the Royal Navy, so formidable, unmatched by any equal, was built from American wood. By the time of the American Revolution, shipbuilding had become the lifeblood of New England. In the 21st century, whoever controls space controls the world. In the 18th century, whoever controlled the seas controlled the world. In the age of sail, shipbuilding was one of the most capital-intensive activities done on Earth. It doesn't make sense to build ships on the moon today, just as it didn't make sense to build ships in Massachusetts in 1550, despite Massachusetts having better wood. But by 1750, once Massachusetts had a developed settlement and infrastructure, building ships there became a logical conclusion, and shipbuilding was the northern colony's main economic driver because it had the natural advantage of hardy New World old-growth wood. But what drove settlement and capital to New England before there was a thriving shipbuilding sector? New England is not known for its rich, fertile soil and abundant crops. No, that was Virginia and Carolina. The incentives that began and grew the Plymouth Company colonies were intangible. Religious freedom, cultural freedom, the general pursuit of an unrepressed lifestyle drove people and capital across the Atlantic. It was not some high-value silver bullet trade good, like with the less populated Virginia Company settlements, which namely exported tobacco, but rather something more transcendental, less quantifiable. New York, 1664, 1776, 1870, 1970. But let's be real, even if the moon was a tropical paradise and not a radiated hellscape, I doubt religion and the pursuit of freedom would lead to its development today. If only there was something similar today, some sort of intangible thing people valued enough to pay for. But that's silly. I mean, After all, we all know modern economies are just manufacturing based, right? Right?
It's free real estate.
It doesn't make sense to start an industrial tech company in a random field in Texas in the middle of nowhere. No engineers will want to move to a random field in the middle of nowhere because there's nothing to do and nobody around. Plus, you'd have to construct a new building from scratch, and since we're in the middle of nowhere, labor and materials will have to travel further, which will increase their cost. Then your facility needs water, power, and sewage, which means you have to pay to install a power line, pipelines, and a septic tank, which will need to be cleaned annually, further increasing your costs. But if that same random field was, over time, developed for some other reason, perhaps it was found to contain a ton of oil or gold, maybe it was religiously important in the past, or it simply had a nice river, then it might be transformed from a random field into a small city. Now it has all the places, parks, and amenities your engineers would like, plus easy to connect water and sewer, road infrastructure, and power. Now it makes a lot more sense to start your tech company there. It doesn't make sense to start an industrial tech company in Industry, Austin County, Texas. It makes sense to start an industrial tech company in Austin, Travis County, Texas. But Austin wasn't developed because of industrial tech companies, it was developed because of other reasons. Austin was settled because it is located along a river. To the east of Austin are some of the most fertile fields in the world, and to the west are wooded hills with abundant game. Austin is centrally located in Texas, making it ideal for government administration. For the moon, this other thing that will develop it is tourism. For decades, space enthusiasts have sought out magic bullets, hoping that if some material or process of sufficiently high value that can only be obtained or performed on the moon or in orbit can be found, then it would spur private industry into action, sparking the beginning of a new space age. Zeblan, helium-3, rare minerals and metals, asteroid mining, and even organ printing have all been touted as the solution to bootstrapping the new space economy. It is true all these are high-value materials and activities which possess great potential to enhance an already established space economy, but none are sufficiently powerful enough to drive sufficient magnitudes of investment and capital off-world necessary to develop the moon. In reality, the silver bullet, the golden key to the heavens, is much less silver or gold and more of a mundane bronze. Tourism. Is this answer boring and cliche? Sure, and that's precisely why it works. It is a common, everyday, time-tested, and proven profit model. That's why it's essential. Across the earth, tourists flock to exotic destinations, carrying with them resources and capital, the means to develop untamed land into habitable territory. And what reachable destination is more exotic and in need of capital than the moon? Basic, boring tourism bridges the gap between having nothing and having something on the moon. Once you have this something, the cost to do other things makes more sense. But lunar tourism is not forever. The fad will fade. The hype will die as it becomes commonplace. People will become used to it. It will be standard. Boring. Like accelerating down the highway at 70 miles per hour in a 2-ton steel fire-breathing beast, or screeching through the air at 500 miles per hour. People didn't settle in Texas because of its industrial tech companies or even oil, but because it promised plentiful, low-cost land to thousands of settlers, the chance to build a new, free life. Rich soils and open spaces, along with rivers and springs, supported farms and ranches in Texas. Crops and cattle flourished. Then oil. Then industrial tech companies. But truth be told, Texas's land isn't that cheap anymore. Most people aren't cattle ranchers, and what oil's left isn't all that accessible. Yet, Texas is currently the fastest growing state in the Union, with the second highest GDP. So lunar tourism can fade. That's okay. It is what gets us from nothing to 1664. It is useful as a bridge, meant to be crossed, surpassed, and forgotten. For it's what lies on the other side of that bridge that truly matters. And finally, a huge thanks goes out to channel supporters, Mustafa Mond, and especially Brandon Hicks for becoming the channel's second Patreon supporter. The support really helps justify making these cool animations, of which more will come.